LINKS. I'm from Free University Amsterdam. I'm joined today by my colleague Matthew Brandlat. He is the coordinator of a sister project to us titled Engage. And we're going to do these presentations back to back because we belong to the same research cluster of 6 projects that are funded under the European Horizon Framework for Research and Innovation. These projects focus on disaster resilient societies, so we look at multidisciplinary research, different factors, societal, technological, institutional, and we focus on various aspects in that related to that, so empowering actors at local levels, engaging with civil societies, including vulnerable groups, and looking also at the technological interfaces within societies and between authorities and other actors. So today you'll hear a bit about the LINKS project and the Engage project. We are also the oldest projects in the cluster. All the projects contribute to the Sendai Framework and the Sustainable Development Goals in different ways, but certainly collectively as a cluster we contribute to the Sendai Priority 2, focusing on disaster risk governance. We do that by looking at ways to improve information exchange among different actors in the disaster management, disaster risk reduction process. So that can be first responders, emergency management professionals, authorities, citizens, schools, businesses, and so forth. All of that as a way to contribute back to a more holistic framework for disaster risk management, particularly at city levels and local levels. So inclusive practices there, and integrating that into the plans and procedures for more disaster resilient cities. So I'll start off by going a little bit into the LINKS project. We are a project that started in June of 2020. We run for a duration of 42 months, so we're in the last year of the project now. The project was funded with just around 5 million euros. It includes 15 partners from 6 different European countries. It's different types of stakeholder organizations, from disaster management organizations, civil protection organizations, can be fire departments, local municipalities, and also research institutes. We have 2 associate partners in the project. So one of them is the Disaster Preparedness Prevention Initiative of Southeastern Europe. And the other one is our partner from Kobe University, the Center of Resilient Design. So we're lucky to have a couple of the members from there in the audience today, Professor Kiku Hakogo and Professor Abel Pinheiro here taking videos for us. And we'll talk a little bit about what we do. So what is the overall objective or vision of LINKS? We see social media and crowdsourcing, and when I say those terms, I've been told that in this region, when you talk about social media, you use the word SNS, or the abbreviation SNS, so social networking services, things like Line and Twitter, tools like this. And when I say crowdsourcing, I mean things like, I think you could associate it with crowdfunding, but in this case, it's crowdsourcing of information, resources, in emergency situations. Those could be also for volunteers, which you'll hear about a little bit later from my colleague Matthew. Well, we see those technologies and those platforms for those services as bridging mechanisms for improving local resilience. So connecting authorities with other actors, whether that's civilians, private sector, or so forth. So overall, as a project, our vision is to strengthen the links between these technologies and the social side of this, the society itself, with that really core focus on the social networking services and how those play out. So to do that, we conduct a large study across 3 different domains. So we look at a social domain, we look at elements related to disaster risk perceptions and vulnerabilities in different geographical contexts, different hazard contexts, and how that plays into people's uses of social networking services in these applications. We look at an institutional domain, so we look at disaster management processes, the procedures in place, both informal and formal procedures that emergency management organizations use to interface through social media in all phases of disaster management. And we look at the technical side, so also the technologies itself, of course. From a project perspective, we have some quite clear policy lines, and certainly they contribute also to the Sendai priorities, particularly Sendai Priority 1, so understanding disaster risk. We focus a lot on education, so working with schools and educators on how to engage with minors, and these processes of using social media and crowdsourcing, how to do that in a very productive way in terms of the disaster risk reduction. So a big focus on preparedness there. A focus on citizen involvement, inclusiveness, and looking at underlying factors that might contribute to vulnerability in this area. So accessibility to the platforms, mobility, connectivity, and so forth. We look again, as I mentioned earlier, at that institutional aspects of disaster risk governance, both at informal and formal processes, issues of credible information, so the messaging that's sent out by authorities. There's been a few presentations here today talking about that. But also the messages that are received, how to deal with that information, and learning in institutions to integrate the processes. And we looked then at enhancing preparedness from a technical perspective too, so the risk communication tools, early warning systems, and different applications for multi-directional and targeted communication. So the study takes place across 5 cases, 4 European countries and 5 case studies, I should say. They all have a specific hazard profile, so we are looking at earthquakes in the province di Terni in Italy. We look at industrial hazards in the south of the Netherlands, a large chemical facility there. We're looking at flooding cases in the Copenhagen region of Denmark, and we look at 2 cases in the German context, one focused on terrorism and working with the police and law enforcement, and the other on flood or droughts. I won't go very deep into the research methods, but just to give you a high-level indication, we carried out a series of desk studies on these topics, and then a large series of interviews across the cases, which came out with quite a lot of interesting information, mostly from disaster management organizations. So again, focusing on issues of credibility of information, fake news, descriptions of the type of technologies they were already using and things that they needed, their processes for working with communities in terms of integrating the risk communication, crisis communication, both formal and informal, and a number of other things, including how do they engage with citizens, and how do they mobilize volunteers and citizens in a crisis situation. We also conduct a large survey asking similar questions on the needs from mostly disaster management organizations, civil protection organizations, and so forth. Overall, what came out of that was that there's obviously a very strong interest by DMOs or disaster management organizations to engage with social networking services, but in general there's really a lack of best practices on this, so how others are doing it. There's not a lot of sharing going across institutions, and that can be even within the same country or region, so one fire department does one thing and another 30 kilometers away does something else. There's not very many guidelines on this, so not a lot of formal procedures, quite a lot of informal procedures, but a lot of formal procedures, policies in this area. A lack of understanding on how to engage citizens, as I said earlier, into the processes, and a lack of an overview of technologies in this area. So this is where the results from the LINKS project come in. We contribute to this by building a framework of different products that can serve this. So I have 3 minutes left. You can access that through our online platform, the LINKS Community Center. Through the center, we have, as I mentioned, a couple different solutions. So there's a library of technologies that are being used currently in the disaster management field related to social networking services and crowdsourcing. There's a library of guidelines, including both informal guidelines, but also policy level use cases. So really good examples from other entities that have employed it in disaster risk management, and a number of other tools that I'll talk about here in a little while. Just to give you a kind of general overview of what the libraries look like inside the platform, and you can access this now. This is an example of our technologies library. So based on a series of filters for functionality, so say that you want to do some search and monitoring or some sort of analysis of social network service data, you can select your filters, and a number of other things, which type of platforms, for instance, Twitter or Facebook does it support. You'll get then a list of results there. Let's assume that you took one of the top results. You'll then get a summary of what that application can do. So in this case, it's a technology called Pulse. You'll get a summary of what it can cover, the types of platforms that it supports, the type of communication that it supports, so authority to citizen, citizen to authority is a two-way, so forth, and also a number of other summaries on the functionality. We have something similar for our guidelines library, so based on a number of filters, this could be the hazard phase, the type of theme that you want to work with, and of course the type of language that the policy guide or the guideline is in. You can select the filters, you'll get a list of guidelines, and then you'll get a summary of the guideline that you select, so an abstract. Also, we pull out relevant information, so in case it's a long abstract, you don't need to go through the whole guideline. We're currently working on additional solutions in this context, so we have a use case library, as I mentioned earlier, which gives really useful examples of the application of social network services in disaster management processes. And we're working also on an educational platform. This is linked, it's its own website linked to our community center, which is meant mostly for educators, for working with children, different games and different practice examples on disaster preparedness. And a little bit later, after my colleague gives his presentation, you'll have an opportunity to give us some feedback on some of these tools. So thanks, I will turn it over to my colleague Matthew.
Thank you, Nathan.
Not so many people.